Good evening, everyone out there. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am joined by Dr. Heywood. She's waiting in the wings. She's waiting in the green room to join us for our talk on alcohol, health, and consciousness. I'm Claire. For those of you who I don't know, I'm the founder of the School of Modern Meditation. I'm a meditation teacher, and I also work with people, helping them reset their relationship with alcohol because I myself had a pretty serious drinking problem for a long time, and now have 10 years of sobriety under my belt, which I'm incredibly proud of. And it hasn't been easy. And this talk has come about because a couple of my resetters came from Autonomy Health. And so after a little bit of diving into what they do, I actually saw that you had written a blog on alcohol, actually a couple of blogs on alcohol this year that were really interesting. And for me, I wanted to do a chat because there have been shifts in how people are drinking, and there's more information out there about alcohol. And so that has changed how people drink. But I still think, there are so many interesting things to learn about alcohol, what it does to our physical health, our mental health, emotional health, and then also, as I will speak to throughout the conversation, our consciousness, which is something that we are deeply interested in as meditators. So before we get started, can you just share a little bit about what you do, your experience, how alcohol shows up in your clinic? You mentioned just before we started this chat that you talk about it every single day. So it is a big part of people's lives still, even though things are changing.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for dedicating an hour of your evening to this talk. We appreciate you being here. My name is Dr. Ula, and I actually, before I started my own preventative health clinic, I was an ED consultant, emergency department. So I have seen a lot of drunk people in my life over 15 years in various states of disarray in the emergency department, not their best selves, no judgment. We all do silly things, myself included in youth. But for the last 8 years, I've been doing preventative health and precision medicine. And what that means is we like to spend a lot of time with individuals, which you just can't do in the public health system, really get to know them, do a lot of measurements. Currently at Autonomy Health, we do over 100 biomarkers when any patient walks in the door, because I need that data and they need that data to establish a baseline of where their health is at. And then everything starts from there. So we map out a journey with them, looking at their current lifestyle, their health goals, what they want to achieve. And we put all of that through the filter of what's going on when we analyze those biomarkers in their lifestyle. And the lovely thing is we get to work in this awesome team with health coaches, with nurses, naturopaths, doctors. And so we bring a lot of different minds to the table for each patient, spend quite a bit of time doing a deep dive on what they need. And then I have the absolute luxury of 45 minutes sitting down, getting to know someone. And I see myself as a storyteller rather than a doctor. So I basically tell stories all day, every day to people about their health, why we think certain things, changes would be beneficial, and how can they achieve those goals. And then we like to see people every 3, 6, 9, 12 months and map out this journey and walk along kind of hand in hand with them as they transform their health. And we've seen the most radical health transformations, even in 82-year-olds who reverse their diabetes in 3 months just with diet. And they're riddled with arthritis, they can hardly move, but they inspire me every single day. So I learn so much from my patients. And the biggest message for you tonight is no matter where you're at with your health, your body has this incredible innate healing ability. So if you just put the right conditions around it in terms of your lifestyle, and especially what you're putting in your mouth, you will be amazed at how much your body can heal and the things you can achieve. And that is why I'm really loving the space that I'm working in. Emergency medicine was very fun, very colorful. It's a kind of past chapter, but that huge degree of exposure to thousands of humans has given me a real love and a deep understanding of the human psyche and why people do certain things, and the pain and the conditions that we all suffer with, no matter how old we are, race, color, how much money you've got in the bank. Humans inherently are all the same. We all want to avoid suffering. We don't like pain. And that's probably why we drink too much most of the time.
So when you talk about this, our body's incredible innate capacity to heal, what does alcohol do? to that innate capacity to heal? Does it affect it?
Oh, how long do you all have? Dr. Killjoy's coming out, warning.
But
Okay.
it affects every system in the body, doesn't it?
Yeah, let's boil it down to a very simple fact, which is that alcohol, ethanol, is a poison. The minute you put it in your body, it is water and fat soluble, which means that it can go anywhere in your body that it likes. It can get into any cell, and particularly it can get into your brain. So you've got this lovely blood-brain barrier that usually protects your brain from all sorts of chemicals and nasties. Alcohol just sails through that. So it can go anywhere it likes in the body. It's broken down pretty quickly by the liver because immediately the body goes, oh, there's poison on board. We need to detoxify. But the first step of breaking down alcohol in the liver is to make something called acetaldehyde, which is an even more toxic poison. And depending on your genetics and how fast you process it, that depends on how much of that is going to hang around and how long. And acetaldehyde is the real big problem because that indiscriminately kills all cells. It wreaks havoc. So it's carcinogenic. It causes DNA mutations in your cells, which means that they're more likely to replicate in a faulty way. And that's essentially what causes a tumor to form, little cells that no longer behave and obey signals that regulate them. And it also at the same time turns off your little tumor suppressor genes, which is your whole system for killing cancer cells. Because every day we have thousands of cancer cells in our body from little mistakes, but we have great systems set up to catch those and neutralize them. But alcohol attacks both sides of the equation in that it's promoting tumor growth and downregulating your ability to stop and regulate that tumor growth. It's a poison that loves to cause cancer. It's very inflammatory. I was telling my patients today that it's kind of like drinking hand sanitizer. So you know how we use alcohol to kill surfaces and disinfect cuts and wounds? It kills indiscriminately good and bad gut bacteria. And so unfortunately, when you drink it, it's really disrupting your lovely gut microbiome. And you need a very diverse, healthy gut microbiome, that little kind of host of bacteria in your gut for health. So it's killing some good gut bugs, which are protective. And then it's also attacking the lining of your gut. And you may or may not have heard of a term called leaky gut, but that's when the fragile lining of your gut gets degraded and, you know, it might get a bit gappy instead of being nice and tight. And that means that when you're eating food and drink, the things that should not pass into your bloodstream and just should pass through your gut and out as poop, basically, can leak into your bloodstream through that leaky gut lining and cause a lot of inflammation. So you've got the kind of carcinogenic cancer side, you've got the pro-inflammatory side, and then you've got the stuff that's going on in the brain. So in the brain, it's affecting a lot of your neurotransmitters, which are your brain chemicals. Serotonin, you may have heard of, happy hormone, affects your cortisol, the stress hormone that is produced in your little adrenal glands that sit above your kidneys. And it affects your dopamine, which is your pleasure hormone. So what we've discovered is that people who are long-term heavy drinkers, and we can talk about what that is, they're at increased risk of cancer. They often have poor gut health. They're very inflamed. And unfortunately, it also causes a long-term suppression of well-being, and it raises your natural kind of cortisol so that you feel inherently more stressed more of the time and less able to cope. So people often say drinking alcohol is a way of coping that ironically makes you less able to cope. The people who drink because they have a difficult work colleague will find that colleague harder and harder to deal with. They'll wake up more anxious. They're more easily overwhelmed. And it's just a vicious spiral. And the last message is that the more you drink and the more you disrupt your gut microbiome, the more inflamed you get, the more your brain changes, the more impulsive you become, and the more likely you are to drink more. As you can see how patients kind of enter this spiral of drinking more and more to try and correct their neurotransmitter imbalance and their mood issues, and also the gut and the inflammation. So yeah, that's just literally touching on the surface, but bad.
A little bit of a boring backstory for me. So heavy drinking was normalized in my upbringing. And when I first realized in my late 20s that I potentially had a drinking problem and really cognized how much I was drinking, it came as a shock to me that what I was doing was abnormal because I was surrounded by people who drank probably more than me. It seemed to me like a neutral substance. It seemed to me a glamorous substance. It seemed to me a celebratory, happy, amazing substance. And so when I had to figure out how I was going to exist without it, and when I started to investigate and learn about some of these, health effects of alcohol, I couldn't believe that such a dangerous substance was a prevalent and innocuous part of society. And that was actually probably about 15, 16 years ago. Things have changed now. There is so much information out there. People know that it's not good for us, maybe not to the specificity of what you have just described, but people are more and more aware of the dangers of drinking. So when people come to you and you start to explain some of this stuff to them, as a general rule, how would you describe people letting go of alcohol? Do most people find it relatively easy to stop? Large majority of people resist? Like, I'm sure there's a full spectrum of response,
Yeah.
but is there kind of some generalizations or patterns?
I mean, the patient I saw today was a massive heavy drinker, a bottle of wine a night with his wife, and then lots more at the weekends, drank most days. He's 70. He just stopped easily. Some people do. It's called spontaneous sobriety. You may have heard that term before. Most people have a detachment process, which can be slow and sort of gradual. And I'd love at some point during this talk to talk about conscious mind and subconscious beliefs and cognitive dissonance, because it plays a huge part in why people drink. But we do have some patients who have a really hard time getting out of the grips of alcohol. The emotional attachment runs very deep. And I was the same as you growing up. I grew up in the 90s and noughties in the UK. Binge drinking was not only glamorized, it was aspired to. And so the more you drank, the better you were. I started drinking probably at 15, 16, and we used to just go out and get hammered in the UK club scene. And it was completely normal. I did not once think that this was not okay. I think
I know.
I had an
Even with
epiphany.
horrific hangovers,
Yeah.
just completely and utterly normal.
Totally. And my personal epiphany with drinking, being a sort of a sporty, athletic, healthy person, but someone who went out 2 or 3 times a week from maybe 16 to 20s clubbing, because that was a big thing in the UK. My epiphany was when I drank a bottle of tequila and woke up and I was covered in vomit. And I thought, oh, I could have died last night. That's not great. I don't remember being sick, complete blackout drunk. And that was a little light bulb moment for me. I think I was 22, where I was like, oh, this kind of drinking is not okay. Went to the GP, had alcoholic gastritis. GP said, you're an idiot, have some omeprazole. And I never drank like that again, because that was my moment of, oh, everyone around me does this. It's completely normal. But actually, this was a deeply unpleasant, traumatic experience to wake up covered in vomit, not knowing what had happened last night. So I just want to reiterate that Dr. Killjoy here, who no longer drinks, by the way, from 40, I didn't drink because I had an alcohol. I didn't stop drinking because I had an alcohol problem, but I definitely had problem drinking until I was 22, and I woke up and went, oh, this is not for me. I'm not keen on this anymore.
I think that's a really important point, because I work with people who are really serious heavy drinkers or really serious binge drinkers. And then I also work with people, and sometimes these people find it the trickiest, where they don't necessarily drink incredibly problematically, but they know that it is affecting their health. They know that there's a dependency there, and there's, these deep psychological associations with alcohol. And for so many people, it's almost like a friend, a companion. Yeah.
I call it the frenemy. My patients always laugh when I say it's your best friend in front of your face, and in the background and stabbing you in the back, and here are all the biomarkers that are showing you what's going on, your fatty liver and your blood pressure and your inflammatory levels and things.
On that note, how about we go into some of the health effects that you were talking about earlier, and then we move into some of the more psychological aspects and the cognitive dissonance. So interesting. Subconscious drivers of drinking, which once we start to unpack those, then there really is this beautiful reframing that can happen.
Yeah, definitely. I don't prepare lots of boring medical slides. We have 3, because the biggest thing is that people do not realize that their drinking is problem drinking because it's so normalized within their friendship group. I have some very heavy drinking friends, and they would classify as alcohol misuse. First of all, with sleep, patients come in very, very frequently with issues with sleep. And they may feel that they are pretty light drinkers. They might just have a glass of wine with dinner. They might just have 2. But I wanted to show this because it's a very powerful graphic of one of my patients, and this is what I see day in, day out. So this is Oura Ring data, sleep tracking data. You might get it from Whoop, from Garmin, from your Apple Watch. And what you'll see on the left is this patient, their sleep without alcohol. So they went to bed at 9 o'clock. They got up at 6. The graph here shows that the white is little blips of being awake. The pale blue in the middle is light sleep, which is the majority of our sleep. The first half of the night, you can see this patient gets a really nice amount of deep sleep, which is the dark blue. So about an hour and a half. So 21% of their sleep is deep sleep, which is amazing because this is when your brain's cleaning itself, doing its housekeeping. This is what protects you against heart disease, strokes, cancer, dementia. You can see these light blue blips here are rapid eye movement sleep, and they're predominantly in the second half of the night. And again, they're getting about an hour, 36 minutes. So that is a decent night of sleep. This patient then, on the right-hand side, you can see that they have 2 units of alcohol. So they said to me, I had a big glass of wine, 2 units of alcohol. Really not very much by most people's standards. And how fragmented is their sleep? So you can see that their deep sleep has gone down by a third. They only got 59 minutes, despite going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. So they've lost 30% of their capacity. And that is equivalent to aging about 20 to 25 years. So as we get older, we lose the ability to have as much deep sleep, and our housekeeping of the brain and our ability to clean it is reduced. It's the same as having a cup of coffee before bed. You can actually reduce your deep sleep by, 20%. So that's very significant. Then you look at their REM sleep. It's appallingly low. So this is what alcohol does. It fragments sleep terribly, and particularly in the second half of the night, and you get a lot less rapid eye movement sleep. This sleep's crucial because it's when you're processing your emotions. It helps you be emotionally resilient. And particularly, it's when you're storing your memories from the day before. So if you're studying or you've done a big work day and then you go out and have alcohol, your ability to solidify and keep those memories is vastly diminished. I dread to think of what I did to my own brain with medical school exams and drinking, but we won't go there. And you can see that this person got literally 2 hours less sleep, same time in bed. That is just from a big glass of wine with dinner. So
can I just ask a question about deep sleep?
Yeah.
What is like a good amount of deep sleep in the nighttime?
Depends on your age, but if you can get at least 20% of your entire 7 to 8 hour block as deep sleep, that's considered really healthy. So for a younger person, you'd want at least an hour and a half. It does diminish with age. So an 80-year-old's rarely going to get an hour and a half of deep sleep. If you want to reduce your deep sleep, drink alcohol and drink caffeine after dinner. Then the next slide, let me just be a little bit clunky here and share again. I want to share the equivalent, here we go, of heavy drinking. So people often think, because they're surrounded by people who drink a lot more than them, that their drinking is okay. They may get up without a hangover. They may go to work and function quite well. They may think that they sleep okay. But heavy drinking is actually classified for women as 4 or more drinks. Now, a drink is a unit. It's not a glass of wine. So a unit would be 1 single shot of a spirit, like 110 mils of wine, which is the tiniest glass of wine. Most people don't pour that. In a restaurant, you might get 250. So that would be a good 2 units. Or it would be like a stubby beer would be maybe 1.3. So 4 or more drinks.
Has this changed over the years?
No, it's pretty similar. Yeah, it's pretty similar. Of course, the strength of beer and spirits differs worldwide. So in Russia, the drinks are much stronger compared to in the States, compared to Europe. But essentially, a unit is 1 shot of spirit, about 110 mils of wine, or it depends on the strength. But if you're looking at a 5% beer, like a small bottle of beer is usually about 1.3. So for a woman, 4 or more drinks on any one given day. So that's basically like a tiny bit over half a bottle of wine. 8 or more drinks per week. For a man, it's 5 or more drinks on one night, or 15 or more drinks per week. So this is what's classified worldwide as heavy drinking. And that might shock some people because they're very used to just having a glass or 2 of wine with dinner, maybe a little bit more at the weekend. But this heavy drinking is a cutoff for when all of a sudden you massively escalate your health risks of particularly breast cancer for women.
And the other thing is, we have learned in the last couple of years that it's not healthy to have any alcohol.
In the 80s, 90s, noughties, there was this thing about, oh, red wine is good for you. The resveratrol component of red wine is healthy and it's good for your heart. But actually, they've completely backtracked on that. The amount of wine you have to drink to get the resveratrol, the anti-aging kind of component, is so much more than is healthy that there are better ways to get that. And they've said, unfortunately, there's no safe drinking limit. There's been recent consensus is mainly around cancer. The research back started in like the 1980s, the cancer risk with alcohol. But if we just talk about breast cancer in particular, because there's a very, very strong association with that, 1 in 8 women worldwide will get breast cancer. But for every one drink you have, and that's again a tiny glass of wine every night, your risk goes up 5%. And then you have additional risk with every drink. And the stats I've got here are that if you are having 3 drinks a day, so 3 tiny glasses of wine or 2 smallish glasses of wine, instead of 1 in 8 women getting breast cancer, your risk is now 1 in 6. And then if you add in a family history of someone having breast cancer, a relative, and you have a higher waist circumference than 80 centimeters, which so many people do. So you're talking about the visceral fat, the fat inside your tummy, around your organs. And particularly when you're getting into obesity territory, your risk could be 1 in 3. And then if you're smoking as well, just it gets worse and worse. So they now say that in terms of cancer risk, there is literally no safe limit and 0 is best, which is interesting.
So when your people come in, do you suggest to everyone that they stop drinking?
No, I think if we put patients in groups, so there's the patients who are problem drinkers where it's actively harming their health. And that's patients with fatty liver disease. I have patients with cirrhosis, which is scarring of the liver because of either excessive sugar consumption and obesity or often alcohol. They may have like an inflammatory condition like rheumatoid arthritis. They might have, inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Those people should absolutely not be drinking at all. There's patients who are severely insulin resistant, which means, they might be diabetic. They might have heart disease. They might have a strong family history of dementia and even be starting to experience some cognitive decline. That's a group of patients that I say, look, we never judge you. It is your body. You're 1 in 8 billion people who gets to decide what to do with this meat carcass that you're carrying around, this vessel. It's your responsibility and your choice, but you need to know that this is what's happening every time you drink. So that's the high risk group who are really diseased. And yes, I say to them, look, I think you should stop drinking. And of course, there's also the group who are dependent, who have a real problem with alcohol. They need extra layers of support. But there are some people who cannot drink because it spirals into binge drinking, blackout drinking, and chronic misuse. So they are kind of all or nothing. Often they have a strong family history of alcoholism and problem drinking. Then there's the group in the middle who might have bad gut health. They're perimenopausal or postmenopausal. Drinking makes their hot flushes worse. It destroys their sleep. They're putting on weight. They're very frustrated about the weight gain. They feel like they're eating well and they're going to the gym. But we know that alcohol is not serving that population. And so we often recommend a little experiment, an alcohol holiday, just so they can experience life for 1 to 3 months with no alcohol, and then they can make a really good decision about whether it's worth it or not. But until you've been free of alcohol and you can see how good you can feel and you can see how much your numbers can improve when we do their health data, I don't think people can realize their full potential. So we love to do an experiment with them. And often they don't go back. Very frequently, they don't go back.
I've found, so I worked with people for a month and then it was 3 months. And then I started working with people for 6 months because I found that it wasn't really until the 3-month mark.
Yeah.
The first couple of months for many people, even if you're not a super heavy drinker or a problem drinker, there is FOMO and like a lot of the cognitive dissonance and loneliness, boredom, all these different
identity, like a personality crisis. And the reason, Claire, that it's quite hard for the first month or two sometimes is that when you're a hardened kind of chronic drinker, and that sounds like a harsh term, but literally it could be 2 glasses of wine 3 times a week for 10, 20 years. That's chronic alcohol use. You actually get a lot of changes in your brain, which make you a bit more depressed, lesser well-being, but also more likely to drink. And so it takes 2 to 6 months for rewiring of that neural circuitry in your brain to occur. Some people it happens quite quickly, but some people do need like a good 6 months off to experience that natural well-being and that normal elevated mood and basically a rebalancing of their brain chemicals.
That
3 months is a minimum really for a holiday.
That's why meditation was such a powerful tool for me, because it was actively amplifying the changes in my brain and learning to integrate the uncomfortable sensations and experiencing getting feel good chemicals from literally the opposite of drinking.
Yeah.
Normally, when I was drinking, it was to change my internal state, to create excitement, joy, to numb certain emotions, etc., etc. And so I had to learn how to feel and produce and create and completely change how my brain experienced the world and my relationship to myself. And I couldn't have done it without meditation, that's for sure. Because
Yeah,
it's
100%.
not just as straightforward as, yes, some people do surprise us, and there is the spontaneous sobriety. Like I have had people and I've been like, are you sure that
Yeah, they have an epiphany. They have a light bulb moment. And it's when all of a sudden their conscious belief system of drinking's not doing me any favors, it's expensive, I want to stop. And their subconscious, they unite and you have this harmony and it just, boom, it happens. And then the lovely thing is it's effortless. There's no pain.
I call it the paradigm shift.
Yes,
So it would be
100%.
a moment where, there's resistance, there's still, these perceptions and beliefs under the surface. And then I get them to write positives on a seesaw. And when you start to see these positives stacking up, eventually, and this is what happened for me, was I could not think of one good reason to have even one drink.
Yeah,
It's
this is such
one of the common things that I was up against is like, why can't you just have one? Why do you have to be so extreme? And I'm like, well, now I just don't understand. I don't understand the point of one drink.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it
And
took a while to get there.
it does. This little book, which I'm about to show you, is one of our favorite tools in the clinic that the health coaches use a lot of. So this book is The Alcohol Experiment by Annie Grace. And it's so good because it's a whole month. It's a 30-day experiment and it walks you through it. And the whole way, she's not saying you've got to rely on willpower, because we all know that we have a finite amount of willpower and that it runs out quite quickly if we've had a hard day at work, the children are screaming, we've had an argument with our husband, whatever it is, it erodes your willpower. So by 4, 5 o'clock, you get home from work, there's no willpower left. And your subconscious mind will just kick in and you'll do what you've always done. So
Good old fuck it switch.
yes. And I think we cannot rely on willpower for any kind of health habit that we want to kick, whether it's sugar, drugs, alcohol, internet shopping. So you've got to first resolve the inner conflict. And this book talks beautifully about that. So for example, she says, in alignment with your talking about meditation, get curious. So bring awareness to what's going on. Recognize that your feelings and your physical symptoms are real. Because when people stop drinking for the first month, they might feel more anxious. They might feel more stressed. They can feel quite a bit of physical withdrawal depending on how long they've been drinking and how much. And she says, honor them, appreciate what your body is trying to tell you. Do not give in to the temptation to use alcohol to numb these feelings, because they're temporary, they'll go away in time. And I like the tip she gives. She says, anytime I had a strong urge to drink, I sat with it, went deep into what was going on. I became an internal reporter. I ask myself questions all the time to find out what I am feeling exactly and what's causing me to feel that way. Sometimes I felt like I was missing out because I was with a group of friends who were all drinking. We all know how that feels. Other times I had a hard day at work and I felt like I needed a drink to calm my nerves. Hands up if you have been in that position. Just joking. And then other times I felt like I'd been good for so long that I deserved to have a drink as a reward. So people are laughing and smiling because now it's like I'm in your head and you're hearing your own brain. So she says, instead of ignoring the discomfort and trying to numb, ask, why do I want to drink right now? What is it that I think alcohol will do to make this moment better? And then ask yourself, is that true? Is it true? So she gets you to be a bit of an investigator. And I do highly recommend this book for anyone who needs some help. And of course, Claire's around and she's got lots of resources, but you've got to go deeper. So can we talk about cognitive dissonance, Claire?
Yes, we definitely can. Let's unshare so we can.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Let me unshare just a second.
Yes.
There
And
we go.
yes.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
the cognitive dissonance is so interesting because we've just absorbed all these beliefs and perceptions about so many things that we think are normal. Like we swim in this water of our environment and the people who raise us and marketing and all these stories and images. And when I first gave up drinking, and so many of the people I work with, it's kind of cool to hear them talk about this, but you start to notice how alcohol is in all the movies. It's in.
Oh, it is. The Holiday. Have you ever watched The Holiday? They just drink nonstop. I watched it last Christmas and I thought, good God, this is how binge drinking culture has been promoted through
Yes,
Hollywood.
that movie, I think it's called Wine Country, with the group of women who go to the vineyards. It's a hilarious movie, but they're all, in their 40s. And I remember watching that and thinking they would not look that good the next day if they had drunk that much. It is glamorized and normalized. And so it can be really helpful to figure out what kind of drinker you are to
Yeah.
really see the stories you tell about alcohol. So if you're a social drinker, what's woven in there? I need to drink to fit in. Is that, something that you can get curious about and figure out what's underneath that? It's not a celebration without alcohol. That's a really common one. Even I used to think that because I drank expensive alcohol,
Oh, that old chestnut.
that somehow made it better.
You're a connoisseur. You're not an alcoholic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then once upon a time, once I worked with a man who owned a really well-known New Zealand vineyard, and the stuff that was woven in there for him, the vineyard was literally passed down through his family.
Yeah.
So there was so much stuff there
Yeah.
about alcohol.
I got a comment once at a function when I was a guest speaker. One of the people was a very famous winemaker and importer, and alcohol is his life, and he's French. And when he offered me some wine, I said, "Oh, no, thanks." And then he said, "Oh, do you not drink wine?" I said, "Oh, I don't drink. I'm not a strict teetotaler. I might have 3 glasses of champagne a year at a wedding, but I'm generally a non-drinker." And he said, "How do you live?" Because in his mind, you cannot live without alcohol. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting insight into your psyche, that alcohol is so necessary on every level for you: job, culture, functions. Yeah.
Yeah, someone I worked with, she was also French, and she was one of the trickiest people to unpack things with because she no longer could eat cheese, and cheese was her life, but you cannot eat cheese if you
Without
can't.
wine.
And
Yeah.
it's a huge destabilizing thing. It sounds silly, but like there's comfort and there's family and there's connection.
Culture, identity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we talk about the different parts of our brain, cognitive dissonance literally is a disagreement in our thinking. We think we have one mind, but actually we have multiple parts of our brain. But if we do it separately into conscious mind and subconscious mind, whenever there's a disagreement in our thinking, there's conflicting desires between different parts of our brain, and this causes pain. So cognitive dissonance is literally a disagreement in your brain. So to give you an example, your conscious mind is your rational mind, which might say, I'm sick of hangovers. It's too expensive. I'm putting on weight. There's a whole myriad logical reasons. My doctor says I've got high blood pressure, fatty liver, why I should not drink. But we've got to remember that about 10% of your decision-making processes every day come from this conscious mind. It's heavily reliant on awareness, willpower, attention, and focus. And the minute you get tired or distracted, you're going to revert back, like when you're driving, into your subconscious mind, which is automatic pilot. And like Claire says, the subconscious mind starts getting programmed from birth. We walk around in this theta brainwave state until we're about 7, where literally we're in a state of relative hypnosis, and everything that's said to us is taken literally. So all your parental beliefs, the environment you're in, is coding you with programs. And then you take work and school and all of this conditioning gets programmed in. And a lot of it's not even true, but we take it as gospel. And 90% of our decision making generally comes from the subconscious mind. So you might have someone who says, I'm sick of hangovers, I want to stop drinking, But the subconscious mind is littered with these little programs like alcohol relaxes me, the fear of missing out. I can't have a good time with my friends. They'll reject me if I'm not drinking. I've had a hard day at work and this is the only way I can relax. I need it to calm my nerves. I've been so good for so long. So you're just going to have this conflict all the time. And that's why some of my patients will do really well for a month and then they'll have a drink and they go straight back to their old patterns because they haven't addressed this belief system that's running. And that is partly why I like books like this, because they help you dive into your belief system and reprogram it, challenge it. Is it true? Does alcohol relax me? Actually, no, it makes me more anxious the next day. It gives me terrible hangovers. I feel bad about myself, and then I drink to numb my pain again. Yeah.
I feel very excited because what you just explained is literally the second part of the course that I teach in meditation, where we go into conscious mind, subconscious.
Yeah.
And where meditation comes into this is an awareness-based practice that starts to bring the subconscious to the conscious mind. So if we learn how to pay attention properly and we're doing it consistently, some of these patterns that, because the things that you're speaking about, the sense that, okay, if I don't have a drink, my friends, I won't fit in. It's not literal thoughts. It's a sense. It is that coding. It's sensation, basically. And our bodies speak to us through sensation. Our nervous system is always looking for familiar and safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so
belonging to society, because you need to be part of the tribe. If you're rejected from the tribe, you don't survive. So social isolation is actually a big fear of humans, isn't it? And not drinking can result in rejection.
Huge fear. And it's all this peripheral stuff that unless we are, read books like the one that you're
The alcohol experiments.
and learn a little more about our psyche and how this coding happens and how we can unravel it, then you are at the mercy of parts of you that you aren't even aware are driving, are steering the ship, essentially.
And that's why they say your brain can be a beautiful servant or a dangerous master. Because the way your mind will try and restore inner harmony when you've got a state of cognitive dissonance is there's a few mechanisms, but denial's a good one. So you basically just ignore the harm that alcohol is doing. It's a defense mechanism to avoid pain. And you say, oh, it was only a couple and I didn't drink all week. You might justify the behavior with excuses like I deserve it or other people drink more than me. You might add behaviors to compensate for your drinking, like going to the gym the next day or doing some exercise or a sauna to sweat out the toxins.
I did all of those. I was very all of those.
And then you just result in more and more inner pain. And the more you want to numb with alcohol, and then the more you drink, the more your gut microbiome's distorted, and the more you want to drink from that perspective. The more inflamed you are, the more you want to drink. So you can just see how it's like a melting pot.
And then when it comes to consciousness and alcohol, you've touched upon this briefly, and also the willpower piece, because one of the things that is tricky for so many people, and I was one of these people, I would say to myself, full delulu, I would say, okay, I'm just going to have one. I'm just going to have one. And I have now learned that for many people, especially if you've practiced not just having one thousands and thousands of times, and if you have potentially some complex PTSD and other different things in the wiring of your brain, after you have had one, because alcohol in terms of consciousness and in terms of the brain reduces your self-awareness, it reduces the critical thinking, it reduces the part of your brain that can go, I don't think that's a good idea. You've got to get up early in the morning and you wanted to go for a run.
Yeah.
It amplifies emotion. It fragments your memory. So your consciousness, literally you lose aspects of consciousness when you
inhibits you. Yeah. Anyone on a diet will tell you that they have one or two drinks and they eat the hot chips and the pizza and the chocolate and it all goes out the window, because alcohol, part of the sort of effect of the poison is disruption of your neurotransmitters, which disinhibits you. It literally crushes, it's called the prefrontal cortex, but think of it as your thinking, sensible, rational brain, the planning, the sensible kind of, I probably shouldn't say that, that will hurt someone's feelings. The suppression of impulsive behavior, it suppresses all of that. So that's why you blurt out silly things and then you'll eat the hot chips and have far too many drinks. So it's quite dangerous for most people to have more than a drink, because after two, it's often game over.
And I think that aspect of alcohol, many people think it makes them more themselves. So,
Yeah.
like there is a belief that when I drink, I'm honest. When I'm drink,
You're just disinhibited. I mean, it can be a lubricant, and it is relaxing initially, but yeah, you've got to address what's causing the social anxiety in the first place. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
band-aid.
it is literally one drink is literally, so alcohol in general is quite literally the opposite of meditation. So we
It
do,
is.
so instead of becoming, in meditation, we become more stable, more
Mm,
integrated. We have the capacity to become aware of awareness itself, aware that we are a human in a body having this experience, aware of our thoughts,
mm,
feelings, perceptions. But the minute you add alcohol into the equation, your
mm.
awareness starts to disappear.
Quickly, yeah.
Yeah, it is you
Same
become
with drugs. Mm,
stable. And in terms of those different parts that we are as human beings, we actually become more fragmented. And depending on what's happening in your life at the time, depending on the people that you are with, different parts of you will become amplified
mm,
rather than, moving through the world as a more holistic, integrated, harmonious human. And that for me was, so I got sober for a couple of years. I used to do a lot of drugs too, and for whatever reason I was able to give up the drugs easily, and so I
mm.
haven't touched anything like that for 17 or so years. But alcohol was really, really tricky for me to let go of. So I had 2 years sober, and the first drink I had, and I'd started doing yoga and meditation, so I was really present in my body, and I was like, fuck it, the fuck it switch went off, and I was like, I'm gonna have a beer. And I had a beer, and the feeling was awful. The taste
Oh,
wasn't great either, but the feeling of almost leaving my body, so no longer being fully present in my body, but I unfortunately pushed on through and kept going.
so many people do. One of my patients once said to me, I gave up for ages, 6 months, and then I just thought, oh, I'll have a couple of drinks. And I had to work really hard to get back into being a drinker. And I thought, oh, what a pity. Now we have to do that again.
Well,
But
yeah, I didn't drink the same. I definitely wasn't as bad as I had been, but I had to reacclimatize and I did have to force myself into it. It was a really it was almost, and I had a lot more awareness, self-awareness, had practices that I could use to, integrate emotion. And I was learning to sort of understand myself, and I'd changed my relationship to myself pretty substantially. But there was still some kind of self-sabotaging mechanism in there that got activated.
Mhm.
Now, there's a couple of questions that I want to ask you, but I also would love if anyone has anything that they would like to ask, just type it in the chat and Eula can read out these questions. If there's
Okay.
anything you would specifically like to know about alcohol,
Mm.
there's something there. Oh, no, it's not a question. But whilst you're contemplating any questions that you might have, so from your perspective,
Mm.
alcohol in 2026. Younger
Mm.
people are drinking less, potentially because they're all getting their dopamine from their screens, but we won't go there. We
Yeah.
won't talk about that addiction.
Yeah, that's quite a
So
serious one.
similar, similar reasons, for most addictive compulsive behaviors, doesn't really matter what you're using.
No.
It's it's a way to try and address an underlying something.
Mm.
Yeah. So with alcohol, do you see it as something that should be more tightly regulated? Do you think that it would be best if everyone stopped drinking?
Mm.
What are your suggestions as someone who really sees the effects physically, mentally, emotionally? We didn't even get into what alcohol
Yeah.
does to relationships.
Oh, I mean, we'd talk for hours, but I think they'd all fall asleep. Um,
Yeah.
I think it depends on where your starting point is. So if you are not addicted, metabolically really healthy, you have a lot of good protective lifestyle factors in place, you sleep well, you eat well, you exercise, you're socially connected, you're grounded, you've got purpose. I think someone having a couple of drinks every now and again, it's not going to break the bank. And there's no evidence that it causes the thinning of the brain, the accelerated risk of dementia, the cognitive decline, and the mood disturbance when you're sporadically drinking. So that's like, say, if I go to a wedding, I'll have a glass of champagne. I might even have two. But you go for long periods of time without drinking, the body's in a good state. And most people are not in that place.
No, I was, when you were talking about that person, I was like, oh, I would love to meet them.
Yeah. Then you have a lot of normal people who have patchy health. There's some good elements, there's some elements that they're struggling with. And again, for those people, I think depending on how much alcohol they're drinking and how bad their health issues are, it's just always a good idea to do a little holiday from alcohol to see what impact it's having and how good you can feel without it.
And when you say a little holiday, do you
3
mean
months. A
3
month
months?
minimum, but 3 months really. Because like you say, a month's not quite long enough, 4 weeks. I'd say 3 months. And in the grand scheme of your life, 3 months is not a long time, but it can give you massive insights. And what's interesting is that a lot of the big podcasters and high flyers of the world are not drinking anymore. And they're talking openly about how they did a little alcohol experiment and it changed their life. And they never went back. And I just think there's something in that. And I'd like everyone to be able to experience that for themselves so they can make their own decision.
And so what if you suggest this little 3-month alcohol holiday and someone on that alcohol holiday keeps having a drink here and there?
It's not a holiday.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would that person potentially need to contemplate?
Well, they're probably going to get some benefits. So say they're drinking half a bottle of wine most nights or, 10, 20 units of alcohol a week. If they drop down to 2 units a week, they're going to feel a benefit. But we know from Aura data and Whoop and Garmin that even 2 drinks can take the average person 5 days to recover from. So we look at heart rate variability, sleep scores, resilience scores, loads of different metrics, biomarkers of how someone's physiology is responding. And they've got millions of data sets, so it's pretty good quality data. And they saw that the quickest someone recovers from 2 units of alcohol is 2 days, which is quite long. And then most people was nearer 5 days, some it was 7. And then you think that people drink again in that window. So the body's never fully recovering and it's always on the back foot. So they will get some benefit, but it's really good to just have a clean 3 months, if you can, with support. Then there's the group of people that I kind of described earlier who are either addicted, have very significant problem drinking. They need specialist help. And then there's a group who are heavy chronic drinkers and have a lot of health problems, like maybe they've had cancer in the past, maybe they've got inflammatory conditions, maybe they're seriously metabolically unwell, obese, high blood pressure. And they're the ones who we really work with very intensively to help them get off it and prove to them with repeating their data, the biomarkers at 3 months, how much the body can heal when you stop putting a poison in. Yeah.
It is a really wonderful thing to be able to, and this is the great thing about physical health is actually having those biomarkers. Sometimes with mental health and emotional health, it is a trickier beast to quantify. That being said, they're all interplaying, aren't they? Everything interplaying.
Yeah.
Such, the mind and the body are inextricably linked and essentially one. So, you change one thing, it's not just going to affect your physical health, it's going to play into.
Absolutely. We do measure markers for symptoms of stress, anxiety, and depression. And we measure all the physical stuff. But the biggest message is, like you say, you cannot separate mind and body, which is what, unfortunately, Western medicine has tried to do. Because when you have an inflamed, metabolically unhealthy body, you will always have an inflamed, metabolically unhealthy brain. And that manifests as a dysfunctional brain that might be anxious, overwhelmed, depressed, might have burnout. It might not be able to concentrate. You might have more ADHD type symptoms. So when you heal the physical body, the metabolic health, nearly every patient I see says, oh, my brain is so much sharper. My memory's better. My mood's better. I'm clearer. I don't feel so foggy. So you're right. They're one package.
And there's a really, I call, it seems such a simple thing. Okay, I'm going to stop drinking, but it truly can be, as you're saying, a keystone habit. And it's amazing, the karmic effects of choosing not to drink one night. You just remember that sleep graph, you choose not to drink.
Pay it forward. Yeah.
Yeah, you just,
What's tomorrow going to look like? Yeah.
yeah, one of my first mentors in recovery used to get me to do this pick a path,
Mm,
play out of my mind what would
yeah.
happen if I did go out and drink,
Mm,
what would happen if I didn't. And there's this incredible cumulative effect of the teeny tiny choices that we make
mm,
every single moment. And I think one of the things to bear in mind, because a lot of the people that I work with and the people who come to you, they probably have this idealized version, healthy, happy version
mm,
of what they want to be.
mm.
And unfortunately or fortunately, there's a chasm, there's a huge gap between where they are and where they want to be. And to cross that gap, it is teeny tiny little steps.
The law of the 1%. That's just
Yeah.
what our coaches talk about all the time. Play it forward. What's important now? The win. And like you say, you're at this pivotal moment of, do I drink? Do I drive? What is tomorrow going to look like if I drink? I'm going to sleep badly. I'm going to wake up groggy, irritable, maybe a bit anxious. I'm going to feel apathetic and flat all day. I know I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm probably going to reach for the French fries or the donut. And then I'm going to feel bad about myself and start whipping myself mentally about what a terrible person I am. Or I choose not to drink. I drive. I wake up with a clear head. I feel rather smug and supercilious from your work colleagues. And, I have a clear head. I make good food choices. I go to the gym. I feel good about myself. So you're right. It's thinking ahead of what's important now and where do I want tomorrow to land.
I was saying that to my son this morning. I was like, darling, the healthiest things, unfortunately, a lot of the time seem to feel like they're the hardest things.
Mm.
And speaking of smug, I still feel smug when I get breath tested by policemen.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah.
Like, I haven't had a drink in 10 years.
I bet you tell them that too.
The the born again Christian soapboxness of my early sobriety has died down
Yeah,
most.
because you don't need to validate yourself anymore.
Unless it's for my work, I don't even really think
Mm.
of it. I don't even notice alcohol on menus. It's amazing how it literally disappears out of your consciousness when it.
It does. Yeah. I mean, I had that pivotal moment at 22 as a very foolish, programmed into binge drinking medical student, and I never drank like that again. And that was easy for me because I went to a place of such pain for a week, the hangover that lasted the week, that I never wanted to experience that again. But then I did socially drink like a normal person, just not to extreme levels. But it got less and less, and I never drank at home, and it was never an issue.
Yeah.
For me, it was pregnancy and breastfeeding made it very easy to just stop instantly. And then I never took it back up and I didn't miss it. And the thought of, oh, should I have a drink? Actually, no, because then I'm going to end up staying up late. My child wakes up early. I'm going to feel horrible in the morning. And I don't want that. So it's the whole play it forward of it's no longer worth it.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what's important to you and how you want to feel.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And I think I know that for many of my friends, that's kind of been their experience in the last few years for sure. And after having children, I do know lots of people who seem to have naturally just faded out their drinking and they were able to sort of let it go and drink more and more occasionally. And then, yeah, definitely for my personality type, there has always been an intensity and a recklessness and some aspects of my
Mm.
psychology that have made certain things very, very interesting.
Yeah, we're all wired differently genetically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been wonderful to get to know that and to make
Mm.
friends with it,
And to
essentially.
know it's not your fault. So I do a lot of genetic testing of my patients, and we often see these big panels of addiction genes and family histories of alcoholism. And you just have to honor the fact that your brain is programmed a certain way, and people who the warning signs externally are that the more they drink, the better they feel. They'll be the life and soul of the party, and they want to drink more and more, and they have a huge capacity for it. Whereas a lot of people will have two or three drinks, they get high, then they quickly get low, then they feel tired, and they either chase that feeling with more drinks or they go, yeah, I'm tired, I'm done now, I'm going home to bed. But the difference of what's happening in their brain is that some people get this unregulated dopamine flush throughout the whole brain. and it's like a wild firecracker party. So they feel really good the more they drink, and that's quite dangerous. And they reckon about 8% of the population is heavily genetically programmed towards severe alcohol issues if they're not careful because of this kind of brain chemistry. But a lot of people have just a little bit of dopamine, and it's quite well regulated and contained. And so they have a stop button. But we all know people who don't have a stop button. And that's probably what's going on in their brain. So we have to have compassion for ourselves and for other people going through it. And the other important message is that even if you've got those alcohol dependency type genes, the way you can protect yourself is to, for your children in particular, because it's too late for most of us, is to start them drinking or delay the onset of drinking as late as possible. So say if you can hold them off drinking until they're like 20, 21, then even with bad genes for alcohol dependency and addiction, massive reduction in alcohol problem drinking behaviors. If they start at 13, 14, even if they don't have genetic kind of predeterminants for it, much higher incidence of alcohol related drinking problems. So that's kind of good to know.
I've told my eldest son that if he doesn't touch a drop of alcohol until he's 20, I will buy him a car.
You see, that is perfect.
And I'm
great for your bank account.
Great parenting.
Well, if that works, you may have passed on some little party alcohol genes in your brain, so that's going to be very protective. Yeah, I think that's a good investment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
So I've enjoyed it, and it's a pleasure to talk about it. Yeah, it's really important.
No questions? No questions. Okay. Well, we've covered
either that's because we've done a really good job or they're all asleep.
Yeah. Well, I find alcohol chat interesting. I definitely do. It's just fascinating that, it's a substance that is everywhere. And in terms of damage, it is, the most potentially damaging substance here in the world. But that being said, it can be done mindfully. And I did hear from Eckhart Tolle himself that he has a glass of wine every now and then. And once I heard that, I was like, if Eckhart Tolle, one of the greatest teachers of presence, mindfulness in the world, can have a glass of wine every now and then so can other people, just not me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Some people need to be abstinent. Yeah. I'm going to have a really good glass of champagne at a friend's wedding if I'm not pregnant or breastfeeding. Yeah, and I have dementia genes in my family. That's one of the other major reasons I don't drink. So anyone out there, if you've got dementia in your family history, get some genetic testing, look at your ApoE4 status. If you're an ApoE4 carrier, I am, particularly if you have 2 of them, I would really caution against drinking. It has a much worse effect. So this is basically a message to get to know yourself on a genetic level, a biomarker level, a spiritual level, because that inner wisdom will guide you to what's the best choice for you personally.
Yes, make the decision so much easier if you have that information. So after this, I will clip this down. I will send it to you all. I'm going to include contact information so you can get in touch with both of us if you have any questions that occur to you after this. And most of all, if you do drink a bit, it's really important not to make yourself feel worse or do anything that sort of instigates shame or guilt. Like, we live in a pretty alcohol saturated world, so it is not surprising that this substance does take a hold. That being said, you can change and you can reframe your relationship with yourself and alcohol, and you can rewire your brain and do things differently. It is absolutely possible. I am living, walking proof that it can disappear from your life.
I don't feel deprived. I don't feel deprived either. I don't miss it one bit. But the more you shame and guilt trip yourself, the more you'll be tempted to drink to numb that psychological pain. So compassion, exercise, chocolate, meditation. Only if it's over 85% dark chocolate.
Okay.
Cool.
On that note, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to meet you all. May you all make the best decisions for yourselves.
Oh, thank you. That's such a lovely way to finish. And I have so many things that other topics that I'd love to discuss with you. Thank you for the work that you do.
You're welcome, and you too. Take care, everyone.
Good night.